Hi friends, welcome to my channel. In the last program, we talked about the Aryans and about the origins of Indo-European peoples. A link to that program there is in the description of this video. Now I'll tell you in more details about the origin of the Greeks and about the events which took place in Greece in the second millennium BC. We know that at least since the 7th millennium BC, the territory of Greece was inhabited by tribes of Anatolian Neolithic farmers. These tribes were called Pelasgians, and the Greece itself at that time was called Pelasgia. For a long time, these tribes lived in a primitive communal system with a rather high level of material culture. From the middle of the 3rd millennium BC, the first objects made of bronze and silver began to appear. Around this time, the Pelasgians began to undergo significant social changes. The ruling elite began to stand out from the rest of the population. Archaeological research has identified two types of settlements from that era: densely built rural settlements where farmers lived, and citadels surrounded by defensive structures where members of the tribal nobility resided. An example of such a citadel is the House of the Tiles in Lerna, which served as a place of an administrative center and was located on a hill that had been turned into a fortified acropolis. The division of settlements into two types implies that the class formation and civilization construction began in Pelasgia during the second half of the 3rd millennium BC. But this process was interrupted by the arrival of Indo-European tribes in the southern Balkans. In the late 3rd millennium BC, they initiated an invasion of Greece. The timing of this invasion is now determined by archaeological data. For instance, around 2200 BC, the citadel in Lerna and several other Pelasgian settlements were destroyed by fire. Subsequently, new settlements were established in previously inhabited areas. During this period, Greece experienced changes in its material culture, including the emergence of new ceramics made on the pottery wheel. Additionally, during excavations, horse bones were found in some places. This is significant because horses were previously unknown in Greece. Most archaeologists attribute this change to the arrival of the Indo-European tribes. These tribes were composed of Achaeans, Ionians, and Aeolians. The Ionians settled in Attica and the northeast of the Peloponnese, the Achaeans in the rest of the Peloponnese, and the Aeolians in Thessaly and Middle Greece, excluding Attica. For the sake of simplicity, we'll refer to all the Indo-European tribes that migrated to Greece as Achaeans. It's worth noting that the arrival of the Achaeans in Greece coincided with the emergence in Asia Minor of the Hittites, another Indo-European people. The Achaeans, who possessed advanced bronze weapons, horses, and war chariots, easily defeated and subdued the Pelasgians, destroying their palaces and citadels. From this time, around the beginning of the 2nd millennium BC, the formation of the Greek ethnos began. This was a long process of fusion of two cultures, Pelasgian and Indo-European. It's difficult to determine which of these cultures has given more to Greek culture. However, it's certain that the arrival of the Indo-Europeans in Greece brought about significant social changes. Pelasgia already had a class society with marked property stratification, while the Achaeans lived in a tribal system based on military democracy. Thus, their arrival stalled the process of civilization building for several centuries. Luxury items have vanished, and the construction of monumental structures has ceased. The citadel in Lerna was never rebuilt after its destruction. The remains of the dwellings indicate that they were all similar. There were no very rich or very poor dwellings. Although the process of building civilization in Greece came to a halt, it's not accurate to speak of a general decline in culture during this period. The arrival of Indo-Europeans brought advances like pottery wheel, horses, chariots, and advanced bronze weapons. At that time, the population lived in rural settlements. The primary type of housing in these settlements were rectangular or oval-shaped clay houses. The main occupation was agriculture and cattle breeding. They grew wheat, millet, barley, onions, peas and beans, raised bulls, sheep, goats, and donkeys. Due to the scarcity of fertile land, settlements were densely clustered together and often situated atop hills with steep slopes. This seems to have been a tumultuous time, with communities taking measures to ensure their safety. The typical example of such a settlement is Malfi in Mycenaean. The settlement was situated atop a high hill and enclosed by a defensive wall with 5 entrances. At the center of the settlement, on a low terrace, stood a large public building with 5 rooms, featuring a stone hot altar in the largest room. Adjacent to it were the premises of several craft workshops. The remainder of the settlement comprised small living houses and warehouses built in 1 or 2 rows along the defensive wall. The settlement's layout and uniform residential development suggests that its inhabitants share a similar standard of living. The lack of clear social and property distinctions in the Greek society of that time is also evidenced by standard burials with very modest accompanying equipment. This state of affairs lasted for about 400 years. However, around 1700 BC, the situation began to change. At this time, chamber tombs containing rich funerary gifts began to appear. They were vastly different from the previous modest burials. Accordingly, something happened in society, and someone stood out greatly in status and wealth from the tribesmen. What could have happened? Historians believe that tribal nobility has been separated, although they don't explain the mechanisms of such separation, nor why this separated nobility has changed pre-existing cultural traditions. Most likely, the new nobility were not former tribesmen, but rather aliens who have somehow taken control on the territory. It's unclear how these aliens gained power over the Greek communities. They didn't use military force, but rather economic or religious means. Thus, the appearance of people from Egypt and Phoenicia and their rise to power is reflected in Greek mythology. For instance, the myth recounts the story of Danaus, son of King Belus and twin brother of Aegyptus, the king of Egypt. According to the myth, Danaus was initially the king of Libya, but he was forced to flee due to a conflict with his brother. Athena taught Danaus how to build a ship to sail away from the Egyptians. He sailed on the sea for a long time, until he reached the city of Argos. Here Danaus declared that the gods had chosen him to rule Argos. Gleanor, the city's ruler, initially scoffed at him, but the inhabitants convened to discuss the matter and postponed their decision until the following morning. However, that night, a wolf descended from the hills and killed the bull that led the city's herd. The inhabitants interpreted this as a sign from the gods that the alien would take power by force if they didn't accept him. They convinced Glaanor to abdicate, and Danaus became the new king of Argos. He built a citadel and temples for Apollo and Athens. Danaus became such a powerful king that the people of Argos came to be called Danaans, meaning tribe of Danaus. Later, classical writers associated the name Danaus with significant cultural progress. According to them, Danaus introduced writing to Greece, taught the Greeks to build large ships and irrigation facilities, and became one of the founders of the tradition of athletic competition. Another myth that tells of aliens from the east and their rise to power in Greece is that of Cadmus, the legendary founder of Thebes in Boeotia. The son of Phoenician king, Cadmus was sent by his father to find his sister Europe, who had been kidnapped by Zeus. After visiting the oracle of Delphi, Cadmus was instructed not to worry about Europe, but to follow the call and establish a city where she would fall from fatigue. Cadmus bought a coal and drove it east. When the coal fell, he sacrificed it to Athena and founded a city on the spot. Athena granted him royal authority, and his companions became the ancestors of the most noble Theban families. The founder of Thebes gave his subjects laws and became one of the most powerful kings of Greece. According to myth, these events took place 5 generations before the birth of Heracles. In 2003, archaeologists found a letter from the king of Achaea, one of the Greek states, to the Hittite king Hattusilis, dated around 1250 BC. In this letter, the king of Achaea reports that his ancestor Cadmus gave his daughter to King Assua, after which some islands came under the control of Achaea. As you can see, Cadmus was not only a mythical character, but also a real one. There are a number of myths about the emergence of people from the eastern Greece and they gaining political power. We are not going to look at all of them. We are going to look at the result. As a result, in Greece in the 17th century BC, the creation of states organized along Oriental despotic lines began. Once again, the process of class stratification and citadel building began in Greece, as it had 500 years earlier. Thus, the Mycenaean civilization was born. We'll talk more about this civilization in the next program. Subscribe to the channel so as not to miss it. At this point, I wish to conclude this video. If it was interesting, leave comments, put likes and repost. Thank you for your attention. See you later. Goodbye.